really, when you think about it, three things guide our movements through the world: time, space, and money. Time is how long it takes to get someplace. Space is how far away that thing is and whether you can do it, and money is whether you can afford how much it costs you roughly to get to that place. I was reminded of this the other day when I took a cab ride in New York and got what was a graduate level lecture in space-time and really in the spatio-temporal aspects of urban theory. The cab driver was talking about primarily a really radical change that's happened on the New York City streets in the last few years. Manhattan, you probably know this, is a grid: north-south avenues, east-west streets, and the transportation director in New York, a woman named Jeanette Sadik-Khan, has built, among other things, these really interesting bike paths. They're right next to the curb, and the parking is outboard of them in the street. And then there are sort of plantings and painted lanes in the streets to make sure people know where they're supposed to park and know where they're supposed to ride their bike. But the cabbie said, here's what's changed. It used to be that if you were going to try to make, let's say, a left turn, you would be in the leftmost lane trying to make that turn, and you could kind of sneak and do a left turn from the lane right next to that. So there were two lanes that were able to make that turn. Now, one of those lanes is gone. You're in that outboard lane, and there are, in a lot of streets, traffic signals that guide when you can make that turn. And they let people cross before you can go, so you have to wait for whatever pedestrians are there. So that means that now there's only one lane, and instead of two cars from a lane that would have been able to sneak through, now only one can. It used to be 4 cars from a street, right? Now it's just the one. That means that all those other cars that were trying to turn have to wait for their turn, and all the cars behind them back up. Some of the new lanes, for example, are sometimes only supposed to be for buses, but it's different times of day and different days. You have to keep that in mind, or you get a ticket. That means that sometimes they're full of a bus, sometimes they're not. Plus, different streets have trucks on them at different times of day and different days of the week because they're delivering goods to the stores on those streets, assuming they're streets with street-level retail. What all that means in the aggregate is that a cabbie has to not only have a spatial map in his or her head of the city, but another dimension, a temporal map as well, because the city changes over time. At different times of day, it's a different city. Now that got me thinking. I started to do some reading on this, and of course, urban theorists and planners have been trying to figure this out for a long time. Sorry, but it's a hard problem. Cities are different at different times of day in different places. As an example, a downtown, a place where a lot of people come in to work, is incredibly diverse during the day, socioeconomically, racially, because there are a lot of people there with different specialties from different places. But at the end of the day, over the evening, it's really homogeneous. And that's going to be true in a neighborhood too, because neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, tend to be pretty homogeneous socioeconomically and ethnically. How do you plan for that kind of stuff? I don't really know. Planners tend to think of the where and not the when. So could you build a city that was ready to be different at a different time? Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe that's about lighting or, for nighttime use. I know that when you look at maps of where New York taxi cabs do pickups and drop-offs, you can see different places in the city light up with heat. It's late in the afternoon, it's Midtown in New York, and Friday and Saturday night, it's the Lower East Side. The cabbie was interesting about this. He pointed out that on his dashboard was a computer and that you could actually change how much a fee was to do congestion pricing if you didn't want people riding around at certain times of day, or he would appreciate a multiplier to add a couple of cents per mile on shorter trips to account for the gas prices, right? I'm not sure his riders would appreciate that as much either. Well, obviously I wanted to know a lot more about this, but unfortunately we were near the end of the ride, we'd reached our destination, and I'd run out of time.